20 years earlier, humanity had celebrated its first faster-than-light jump as the dawn of a new era. No more light-speed delays. No more lonely stars. The galaxy had finally opened its doors. What no one had expected was how crowded it already was. The Kelleran had been among the first to greet Earth, not with weapons, but with warnings. They were ancient, they said, powerful, protectors of galactic balance. And they watched new species carefully, intervening when a civilization grew too fast, too aggressive, too unpredictable. At first, the relationship had been cordial. Shared technology, carefully regulated trade, observers stationed in Earth orbit for mutual security. Then came the restrictions, limits on human expansion, oversight of military development, advisors embedded in planetary governments, always framed as guidance, always delivered with polite smiles and veiled consequences. Elias Wren had been a junior officer when the first human colony was quietly shut down by Kelleran decree. The planet, they claimed, lay too close to a sacred spiral route. The settlers were relocated. Compensation was offered. Most people accepted it. Elias did not. Over the years, his reputation grew, not as a warmonger, but as something far more dangerous to the Concord's fragile order, a man who asked inconvenient questions and refused to be intimidated by ancient titles. When the Kelleran finally summoned humanity to the Celestial Forum, everyone knew what it meant. Custodianship was the final step, a velvet cage, and Esserin had been chosen to deliver the offer, or the ultimatum, the middle, fear beneath authority. Esserin had not expected to be afraid. She had faced war councils that decided the fate of entire species. She had watched stars collapse into engineered singularities. She had spoken extinction sentences without her voice trembling. But Elias Wren unsettled her. It was not his appearance. Humans were physically unremarkable, fragile, even. What disturbed her was the way he listened. Not passively, not with deference. He listened as if every word was data, every pause a weakness. When she asked her question, protocol dictated that the human representative would request time for consultation, or offer a carefully worded acceptance disguised as negotiation. Instead, Elias had simply looked at her and waited. Esserin felt the forum's ancient observers shift their attention toward her. They expected her to dominate this exchange, to project inevitability. The Kelleran were used to fear. They cultivated it. Fear made civilizations compliant. But humans were strange. They feared extinction, yes, but they also feared the slow erosion of choice. And those two fears did not always lead to the same decisions. She adjusted her grip on the staff, the crystalline surface cooling her palms. Why hasn't he spoken? She wondered. Is he calculating surrender? Or something worse? At last, Elias took a step forward. The sound of his boots echoed far too loudly in the chamber. Before I answer, he said calmly, I want to make sure I understand your offer. Erin inclined her head. Speak. You will oversee our expansion, regulate our defenses, intervene when you deem us unstable. Yes. And if we refuse? Then the Concord will classify humanity as a destabilizing force, Esserin replied. Your faster-than-light infrastructure will be dismantled, your colonies isolated, your home system neutralized if necessary. Neutralized. Such a gentle word for annihilation. Elias nodded slowly, as if confirming a technical detail. And you believe this is mercy? I believe, Esserin said, her voice tightening despite herself, that it is survival. The silence returned, heavier now. Inside her chest, Esserin felt an unfamiliar sensation coil tighter. Anticipation, yes, but laced with something dangerously close to doubt. The human commander's expression softened, not into fear, but into something that unsettled her far more. Understanding. The turning point. Then he spoke. "Emissary Essen," Elias said at last, his voice steady, carrying easily through the vast chamber. "Do you know why humanity hasn't expanded faster?" Esserin blinked, caught off guard. "Your technological limitations." "No," Elias interrupted gently. "Choice." Murmurs rippled through the assembled observers. "We could have pushed harder," he continued. "Built more ships. Armed them better. We didn't because we were afraid of what we might become if we did." He looked around the forum, meeting the gazes of beings older than his species by millennia. "But here's what you miscalculated," he said. "You assumed that fear of extinction would outweigh everything else." Esserin felt her skin shimmer, betraying her unease. Elias drew a slow breath. "Humanity will not submit to custodianship." The words fell like a stone into still water. Gasps, alien equivalents of them, echoed through the chamber. Esserin's grip finally slipped, her staff striking the floor with a sharp, crystalline sound. "You are choosing annihilation," she said, and this time the fear in her voice was no longer hidden. Elias shook his head. "No. We're choosing responsibility." He activated the small device at his wrist, projecting a holographic map of known space. Lines of light flared. Human ships, human colonies, human infrastructure. "You think you've kept us contained," he said. "Observed. Limited." The map shifted. "You didn't notice that while you were watching our borders, we were studying your systems, your response times, your dependencies." Esserin's hearts pounded. "This is a threat?" "No," Elias said softly. "It's an explanation." Another gesture, and new symbols appeared, Kelleran trade routes, energy nexuses, communication relays. "Your empire is vast," he went on, "but it's also brittle. It relies on the assumption that no one would dare push back." He met Esserin's eyes again. "We won't win a war against you," he said honestly. "Not quickly, not cleanly, but neither will you. And in the chaos, the balance you claim to protect will shatter." The forum descended into chaos as observers began to confer in rapid, alien tongues. Esserin stared at Elias, her fear now fully exposed. "Then what do you want?" This was the moment. Elias straightened. "Partnership," he said. "Not as wards. Not as subjects. As equals." Silence, different now. Not heavy. Expectant. The end. A new equation. The deliberations lasted for hours. Ancient minds weighed probabilities, simulations branching into trillions of possible futures. In most of them, humanity was a variable too unpredictable to comfortably control. Esserin remained still throughout it all, her thoughts racing. She had feared his reply because, deep down, she had sensed the truth. Humanity was not asking for permission to exist. They were demanding to be acknowledged. At last, the forum spoke as one. "Custodianship is postponed," the collective voice intoned. "A trial partnership will be established. Shared oversight. Mutual deterrence." The words were cautious, measured, revolutionary. When the chamber finally emptied, Esserin found herself alone with Elias near the forum's edge, staring out at the slow spin of distant galaxies. "You frightened us," she admitted quietly. Elias gave a small, tired smile. "Good. That means you were listening." She studied him, this fragile being who had stared extinction in the face and answered with defiance tempered by reason. "Your species walks a dangerous path," she said. "So does yours," Elias replied. "Maybe that's why we understand each other." Esserin considered that. For the first time in her long life, the future did not feel predetermined. As humanity's ships prepared to leave the celestial forum, not as subjects, but as partners, she watched them go, her skin glowing with a new, unfamiliar color. Hope. And far across the stars, the galaxy adjusted, ever so slightly, to the sound of a single human voice that had refused to stay silent. Years later, historians would argue about the exact moment the balance of the galaxy shifted. Some claimed it was when the Concord amended its ancient laws to allow true parity with a younger species. Others insisted it happened quietly, long before signatures and seals, when fear changed sides in the celestial forum. For Esserin, the moment was simpler. She stood on the observation deck of the Joint Kelleran, human station Helios Reach, watching Earth-built ships and spiral-crafted vessels depart side by side. Their designs were wildly different, human hulls blunt and functional, Kelleran forms elegant and flowing, but they moved together now, synchronized by shared protocols and mutual trust rather than enforced obedience. Elias Wren stood beside her, older, a faint silver threading his dark hair. He was no longer a commander. Titles had lost their edge after the partnership took root. He was simply Elias now, an envoy, a voice humanity trusted. "You were right," Esserin said at last, her tone reflective. "Fear can preserve order, but it cannot build a future." Elias smiled, eyes following the ships into the star-dusted void. "We're pretty bad at perfect futures," he said, "but we're stubborn about trying." She turned to him, her skin glowing softly, a hue that among her people now carried a new meaning. Not dominance, not dread, resolve. "When I asked my question in the forum," she said, "I believed I was offering mercy. And now?" Elias asked. "Now I know you were offering us a choice as well," she replied. "To grow or to remain afraid of those who might one day stand beside us." They watched the last vessel jump to faster than light, its wake rippling across the stars like a promise. The galaxy was still dangerous, still uncertain. Old powers grumbled, and new tensions rose where none had existed before. But something fundamental had changed. Humanity was no longer a subject waiting to be judged. They were a voice, one that had spoken when silence would have been safer. And in that moment of courage, when an alien woman feared his reply, and he spoke anyway, the future had answered back.